Rob's going to keep one eye on the chat. Now, if something comes up that kind of stops him in his tracks, he might divert, but we'll try and come back to the questions at the end. So if you have questions, pop them into the chat. I'm sure there's going to be loads as he goes through the presentation. And I'm looking forward to it. Rob.
Thank you very much. Thank you for that very kind introduction. So maybe introduce myself first of all. So my name is Rob Gorton. I have worked in Toyota Manufacturing UK. I'll explain about the nature of the business before I go into the detail of Hoshin. For around 20 years now. I lived in Japan for a while, teaching English actually. I was a consultant for a little bit, and then I joined Toyota thinking I could get a nice blue chip name on my CV, and here I am more than 20 years later actually. And why have I stayed so long? I mean, it's a really the comment about people and culture, I think, is a really well made one, and I think what Toyota does very, very well is develop people and develop the culture of the organisation. And so it is one which we tend to get people who are quite long service in TM UK. Julie also on the line is longer service even than me. So you know, I think it's a great comment on that. And what I'm about to explain about is as you know, Hoshin and Kanri, and that's that. You talked about tools, you talked about people and culture. In some respects, Hoshin Kanri brings all of that kind of stuff together. So I will start my presentation. Before starting, I wanted to say that as everybody in Toyota Manufacturing UK does, we all have a safety and DE&I commitment, which we make before we give presentations. Mine is I take time to listen to all the voices that help me prioritise mental health and countermeasure safety risks most effectively. So let me see if I can launch my slides up and we'll go through the set. Right. Oh, share my screen first would help. One moment. Okay, there's my horrible diary. Right, first of all, can you see a slide which says Toyota Manufacturing UK and approach to Hoshin Kanri?
Perfect, Rob, yeah.
Fantastic, okay. Well, let me go through these slides and I've already introduced myself. Allows me to. There we go. So a little bit about background and context, first of all, if that's okay. So first of all, let's start with Toyota. In Toyota, we like to start with large and kind of go through the specifics afterwards. So Toyota globally, you can see the number of factories, number of R&D centres and employees and so on across the whole of the world. It's a lot. So total, depending on who you speak to, it's between 68 and 72 factories globally, 20 R&D centres. You can see in Europe we have 6. So I think maybe one of the key things to grasp from this slide is the scale of Toyota, and actually the fact that we can have such a diverse organization and such a globally spread organization and yet have the same way of working and communicating and operating, so that we can have somebody who works in Japan come and work in Europe almost seamlessly. We just welcome back our assembly shop senior manager who had been assembly shop senior manager in one of the North American plants recently. I think that's a very interesting point, which is a kind of testament to the idea and the belief that culture, a shared culture and a shared culture based on TPS and based on Hoshin Kanri is fundamental to our success. So that's a total global picture. Here in Europe, we have the plants you can see on the screen. Briefly, we have 2 in the UK I'll come back to. We have a couple of engine transmission plants in Poland. We have on the bottom right a large plant in Turkey making C platform vehicles, same as TM UK. We have a plant in Czech Republic making Igo, Cross and Yaris, and bridging to France. We make Yaris, Yaris Cross. And in Toyota Caetano, we have a kind of CKD, so complete knockdown plant building, especially Land Cruiser, but also Caetano bus. And actually, TM UK is a kind of mother plant now to Caetano, and I think that's a very great demonstration of the efforts that the TM UK members have gone to in really instilling TPS, strategic planning, Hoshin Kanri into our approach, that we're allowed to take this supportive role to one of our fellow European plants. And here in the UK, we have 2 plants. On the left, you can see Deeside in North Wales, and we manufacture engines in Deeside. We manufacture ZR engines, so they're the ones which go typically into hybrid Corolla, CHR, that kind of class of vehicle, 1.8 litre. And in Burneston in Derbyshire, where I'm sitting now, we have vehicle manufacturing. We have about 6,000 employees across both plants. sorry, beg 3,000 deployed across both plants. We used to have 6,000. We've been producing vehicles and engines here in the UK since 1992. And we make the products you can see on the screen: Corolla hatchback touring sports, and you can see the destination markets. So for our vehicle exports, we sell a number to the UK, about 15%, but the vast majority of our vehicles are destined for the European Union. We have some level of export vehicles as well. And for engines, the engine plant was set up remotely from the vehicle plant in order to be entrepreneurial. And you can see therefore we are selling globally. We sell engines to South Africa. 30% come here to Burnaston to be fitted into our Corollas, and about 60% go to Turkey, where we're making CHR. So a very big selling vehicle, and therefore a very big customer for our engines. And this is what the plant looks like. So it is a very large plant. From the from this side here to this side, it's about 7.75 a kilometre across, and maybe about half a kilometre in this direction. So it's a very, very large plant. And we are fully building vehicles from steel coils and aluminium blanks. We weld the bodies together in a very automated line, our weld shop. We have a painting facility. We're a high integrated plant, so the majority of car manufacturers will have an outsourced infront panel production, rear front bumpers. We make all that in-house in our plastic shop, and that's all delivered to our assembly shop. And maybe just to kind of to sort of showcase the results of some of our Hoshin before I go into how we do the Hoshin. So you can see our priority on safety here, and you can see a very great drop in our accident rate over the years. It's our number one priority, and we base our safety performance on good 5S, means 4S plus sustainability, and really strong member of engagement. You can see our safety dojos here. These are all things which we've kind of actioned through our Hoshin activity. And in quality, you can see we are now one of the global top quality plants for what we call direct run. I'll come to that, but our main quality measure, again, something we prioritize through every member through our Hoshin activity. I want to come to a bit of business background, because this explains about our approach to Hoshin and how we've evolved the business. So we started out in 1992 with a single line and a single model. Over time, our volume increased until our peak was about 285,000 vehicles per year in Burnaston. However, at that time, we were hit by the financial crisis, and also the Toyota recall crisis as well. And following that, we closed one of our lines. We had two lines at this stage and two models, and we went to a much lower level of volume. Since then, we had two models down to one. Brexit was a big crisis for TM UK. I mentioned about the number of vehicles we export. Of course, having a no-deal Brexit would have really impacted that. And where we are now, we are a single line, a single model, and we make around 100,000 vehicles plus or minus per year. So we've gone from very, very busy in terms of our main line and very, very many projects and very high volume to a position where we're much lower volume. And throughout this process, Hoshin has enabled us to do two things. The first of all is to motivate and develop our members. We talk about a healthy sense of crisis, but we talk about flexible, motivated members. So this is a very key thing. But the second thing is we've been able to diversify from purely basing our activity on the albeit quite complex job of building brand new cars to much broader business background. I'm going to skip through this. So what does this mean? In 2016, we were able to open a very, very prestigious Toyota Academy for maintenance members. Since then, we diversified the business hugely. So we launched what we call the Burnaston Refurbishment and Customization Division in our old Line 2 here, where we're making everything from police cars to refurbishing used vehicles. We created a fuel cell Hilux, which is an extremely prestigious project. It won many, many awards, I have to say, globally, and brought our prestige amongst those 68 Toyota factories up very, very high. We launched a Beyond Centre where we showcase hydrogen as an extension of this. And from 2025, we've announced, and we're already piloting, that we'll create Toyota's first circular economy factory in the site, building on our used vehicle refurbishment process. And something which was announced a couple of weeks ago is that we're also being chosen to be the first GR factory outside Japan. GR is a sports car brand of Toyota's. The vehicles are designed for the racetrack, so we're actually building GR Corollas on a completely different assembly line to our main assembly line. And I think all of this demonstrates the evolution of the business, but also how Toyota has seen the potential for this factory and the potential for a very strong kind of development into a mobility company based on our core principles of strong TPS and strong Hoshin Kanri. So that's all by way of introducing you to what TMUK is, but I wanted to start with that because it kind of gives you a demonstration of how we've used Hoshin Kanri not just to improve our core KPIs, although we've done that, but also to diversify the business and to motivate and develop our members, despite some pretty tough business background. Okay, so let me move on to the sort of the explanation of what Hoshin Kanri is and how we apply it here in TMUK. So what is Hoshin Kanri? So the first thing to say, we talked about X matrices, and we don't indeed use X matrices in TMUK or more broadly in Global Toyota. And really, the reason for that is that Hoshin Kanri is seen as a core tool for development rather than deployment of executive strategic thinking. It's a development tool. And this slide here shows how it sits within our global development framework. Now, this framework is universal across all Toyota factories. The basis is the Toyota way. So how do we do business in terms of problem solving, in terms of developing members? What are the core principles of challenge and Genchi Genbutsu and so on? Built on that, we have PDCA, plan, do, check, action. Hoshin is a kind of long form PDCA, as I'll explain in a moment. We talk about building consensus through standard reports, and this used to be called A3 reporting. We're very, very keen on the idea that we can put things on a single sheet of paper and explain and discuss around this piece of paper and argue around the piece of paper and finally come to a consensus whereby we all agree where we're going and we all act as one organization. And guess what? That's what Hoshin is in our thinking. It's a way of understanding how the business needs to go, and then engaging every member of the company towards that same goal. Toyota Business Practices is a problem-solving methodology, and on-the-job development is again a formal methodology for how we develop our members. And those items also link very, very strongly into Hoshin Kanri through the link of problems we solve to our Hoshin, and through the idea of Hoshin being a way of developing our members. And Hoshin Kanri therefore sits at the peak of our development framework. So the first lens I want you to see Hoshin Kanri through is of a development tool whereby we can develop every member of the organization through a common purpose. The second, and this is a very famous kind of a slide within Toyota, the second way of conceiving of Hoshin Kanri is of a way of navigating a route towards a desired future vision. So this slide represents our way towards a future vision, and this road you can see here is the strategic plan which gets us towards that desired future vision. And we have to segregate away the various things people might be concerned about in the organization. So the first thing is, of course, every day we are doing Kaizen, and small rocks on the road can be removed by Kaizen. It's a kind of core part of every Toyota member's belief that that's possible. Hoshin is the big rocks, the big boulders, which we require to work together as an organization to have joint activity and joint focused activity outside of normal activity to remove. So Hoshin helps us identify these. But I think something we forget about when we're talking about Hoshin and strategic planning is that in a lean organization, people are motivated to take action. People are motivated to solve problems. And that means unless they have a clear understanding of the vision, then they'll go away and they'll start solving problems which are not necessarily the ones they need to do. They may be valuable problems. They may be interesting projects, but they're things which we don't need to do to get towards our organizational vision. And for those of you, I'm sure this is a majority of you who lead teams or organizations, I'm sure you've experienced explain to somebody who's really taken a great deal of care to make a proposal, to do a project which isn't really needed. Telling them to stop that is demotivational, and you will almost never get that level of discretional effort again. So Hoshin is critically a way of allowing everybody to self-prioritize, because we understand where we need to go to, we understand where to direct our Kaizen and where to work together towards these big rocks. So that's kind of very theoretical. I want to explain a bit about the characteristics of a successful Hoshin process. And the first thing is it starts by contribution to upper Hoshin. So it starts effectively as bottom up. And respect for people is a core Toyota Way philosophy. And that means that we truly believe the people who understand the process best, I mean, it's kind of obvious to say, but the people who understand the process best are the people doing the process. So the first part about making a Hoshin is this bottom up, how to get the understanding of what the challenges are for the whole organization. We pull together a division at the top, and then there's a breakdown at every level. And the image I'll come to is how to give each area the development through that breakdown. And we talk about vertical alignment. And the second part is horizontal coordination. So there's no point in having a Hoshin in finance which doesn't understand and respect the needs of our assembly shop. Equally, there's no point in having a detailed development and Hoshin plan in our paint shop which doesn't respect the needs of our HR development. So this horizontal coordination at a kind of divisional and individual level is another core part of Hoshin Kanri. So that's a kind of theoretical Hoshin explanation. Let me explain how we do that in TM UK. So first of all, just to explain about the organisation of TM UK. So I mentioned already we have 2 plants in TM UK, and we have a company Hoshin. Now that feeds into and draws from the European Hoshin. This means Toyota Motor Europe Manufacturing Business Unit, and in turn Toyota Motor Corporation Global Hoshin. But in this sort of case study, we're going to look at the TM UK company Hoshin. So there is an A3 document which represents the company Hoshin, but of course that needs to be directional. We can't be dictating what every single member is doing in such a document, and therefore we have divisional Hoshins, of which feed departmental Hoshins and then section Hoshins. And to give you an idea of the kind of span of activity for these areas, a division might be like human resource division or vehicle assembly division. Department, a little bit lower down, employee relations and benefits, part of HR, or assembly, engineering and maintenance, part of vehicle assembly. And then a lower level down, benefits administration or final one line. And as you go through that level, you have from directional to coordinating, departmental activity, we're going a bit more specific here, and then we're going to this detailed activity plan, which is kind of a combination of these 2 levels. The key point is at company level, we're trying to set direction. We're trying to give people the freedom at the level below to innovate and to develop their own ways of problem solving. And of course, this leads down to practical activity in each area by each member. So this is the breakdown of the Hoshin in TM UK. How do we structure Hoshin in Toyota? So it's fairly typical that we'll be consistent across these priorities. So we'd always have a set of priorities which, although we have multiple missions, we cleave to, and that starts with safety and environment, with quality, production, cost coming next, and finally human resource development as an underpinning for all of this. That's why it's a different color. It's not because it's least priority, it's because it kind of cuts through all of this. That provides a clear baseline across years. If we make a massive change, it's going to be less understandable to team members, and Hoshin tends to be evolutionary year on year. The priorities understood across all functions. So finance don't think that they are more important than safety. Policy don't think they're more important than safety. We understand that priority level, but also this allows some consistency through all levels. So if you go on a shop floor and a Toyota plant, and I hope you'll have the chance to come and see us one of these days, you'll see group leaderboards, and they'll all have the same order: safety, environment, quality, production, cost. However, we don't just say, here's this year's safety Hoshin, here's this year's environmental Hoshin. We keep safety environment, we keep HRD because they are fundamentals, and taking those out would send the wrong message to members. However, where we can, we try to combine. So I showed this slide earlier on. This is our quality improvement, and I said there was a KPI, which we're working on, which is improved towards best in the world, and that's called direct run ratio. It's a number of vehicles which pass through a line with no vehicles being taken off the line for any repair. And we're now about 98, 99%, which is very, very high. Previously, it was down about 60, 70%. It's a fantastic KPI to follow because it's not our final audit KPI, but it's a KPI which measures your level of built-in quality and your level of standardized work adherence. So in other words, by following this KPI, we can hit both a quality target and a production target. So this, for several years, has been a primary KPI in Hoshin. Another example, environment and cost. I skipped past this slide, but what it's telling you is that actually TMUK D-side, our engine plant, is going to be the first ever carbon zero plant in global Toyota, which is a big achievement to be carbon zero in a plant which does casting. And they've done that through some level of collaboration, but also through energy saving. And that, in a casting plant or a plant with a big paint shop, hits our cost KPIs hugely. So our energy saving activity allows us to do more than one thing at the same time. So in other words, we maintain the same order, but the combination of activity allows us to amplify the effect of Hoshin. And finally, I would say, and we sometimes forget this, we're in a very competitive organization, so people do forget this, but we always remind ourselves the best way to achieve financial success is through achievement of fundamental performance, because achieving good safety, environment, quality and production will allow us to achieve our cost KPIs. We don't put cost first, no matter how much we're squeezed on volume or on cost per vehicle KPI. So that's the kind of that's how we structure the Hoshin. Then the question is, how do we engage the whole organization so they have a common understanding of all these different goals? And the simple answer, we do it over quite a long period. So our Hoshin year starts in January and ends in December. And we're getting worryingly close to this early autumn time when my team starts to consider how to structure the Hoshin for the following year. But formally, we kick off in September with a Hoshin reflection. That doesn't mean that we've completed the Hoshin by that year, but it means that the activity we've set in place through the Hoshin has got to a sufficiently mature level that we can understand whether or not it's going to be successful, whether or not it's having the right effect. So we start with Hoshin reflection in September to October. We have formal company Hoshin planning sessions, October to November. We finish with a management forum in December. And in January, we're explaining our Hoshin to every single member. And throughout this process, we make sure we have enough catchball opportunities. This means horizontal coordination, vertical coordination, people taking ideas, explaining to their counterparts, bringing ideas back. So between all levels and between all functions. And for the next part of the presentation, I'm going to explain the specific activities which we will take place in TMUK in order to make sure we have a successful Hoshin planning process. And there's a couple of things here where, as TMUK, we found very, very useful tools, and you might find them useful too. So I'm going to flag those as we go along, and we can share them with you, see if they're any use in your organisations. The first part is about this catchball, as I say, and the first part is about contributing to the upper level Hoshin. And we're working towards a point at which our senior management team, that means the general managers or 7 general managers, 4 directors, are sitting in a room understanding about how to make a company Hoshin. It's a very important session that takes place after we've done the data gathering. And I always like to share this slide, which for those of you who are familiar with the space program will maybe see. This is the mission control for the Apollo landings. And I think it's a very interesting analog, a very interesting way of conceiving about Hoshin planning sessions at a top level, because it talks about a couple of things. It talks about what you need to do to get in a position where you can have a successful Hoshin session, and it talks about the way in which the directors and the general manager, the leadership team, need to be behaving in those sessions. And I recommend this podcast. I'll take questions later about the podcast. It's a great podcast. I listened to it. I thought this is just like how we try to do Hoshin Kanri in TMUK, and it's why I use this as a kind of interesting metaphor. It's also an interesting metaphor because it illustrates how poor Hoshin Kanri could work. So in what I would call poor Hoshin Kanri, we have a top executive team trying to utilize the Hoshin process to take their ideas and they say cascade them to the organization. And of course, that's not how things should work in the real world. In the example of the Apollo landings, there's a very clear vision. The vision is simply to land the lunar lander on the moon. And the director saying, guys, you've got to land the lunar lander, or do it quicker, or do it faster, or do it. That's not at all going to help them achieve their mission. What the mission controller is doing in this scenario, he is listening. So 30 Minutes to the Moon is a recording of the traffic between all the various different people responsible for capital communications, about telemetry, fuel levels, and so on. And they're all monitoring their own processes, and they're all explaining and talking over each other. And the job of the mission controller is to listen and to understand, there's a problem here. I need to speak to the person in charge of capital communications because there seems to be something we need to concentrate on. Or I need to listen more. I need to get some more data from people looking after fuel supply because clearly there's a problem going to come up. And in the context of Hoshin Kanri, the job of the directors or the managing director of the company is not to tell the executive or the leadership team what to do. It's to listen and to understand what are the problems that I can intuit are going to cause problems as we work towards a future common goal. So that's the first thing to take away from, I think, this analogy, that we want it to be something about listening and about facilitating people to achieve something together. And the second thing, which will directly link to my next slide, is when I saw pictures like this as a child, I imagined that each of these people are sitting there by themselves, looking at their computer screen, and they're just managing the process by themselves. Of course, that's not true. The person in charge of capital communications has a whole team of people in a different room, monitoring the communications, and feeding into the individual who's sitting in mission control. Same for telemetry, same for each of these different functions. And that's the same we need to create when we're making Hoshin with our executive team. It's not about everyone sitting in the room and just on their own giving the pearls of their wisdom. The assembly general manager, the HR general manager, the finance general manager need to be sitting there with a full understanding of what their function has been doing, what their problems are, what their bottlenecks are in the year, in order that then they can give a meaningful discussion and feedback to the directors who are now listening in this analogy. So that explains a bit about the approach we're going to take. I'm going to explain over the coming slides. And the first part is about bottom up. Okay, so we start out really getting into the detail of what's happening at the shop floor or at the gemba in the office. And we start from what we call the section managers. So section managers are kind of your first line sort of management position in the office, sort of one above that on the shop floor, above group leaders, and they have these very detailed Hoshins. So the first thing we arrange at the start of the Hoshin process is not looking at the total business picture, it's looking at what's happening at the section Hoshins. And this is the first item I'd suggest is a good thing to take away if you'd like to try this kind of style of Hoshin Kanri. Because we designed this in TM UK where we discovered a gap several years ago, that we weren't getting this bottom-up feed in. And the purpose of this document is to make sure every section manager and then every department manager, divisional manager, division general manager, and so on, has a clear understanding of how their workplace is behaving. So we have a form document, an A3 document, as you might expect, which we asked each section to fill in. And this is the format we use. So it starts with the higher level Hoshin, and this is something we don't pre-fill. We asked a section manager and leader in the company. They are leading members towards a common goal. And so therefore, if they don't understand the high level Hoshin, the company Hoshin, the management messages, this is their opportunity to go out and find and ask. So what's the high level Hoshin? What's the management messages? And therefore for them in their section, it could be benefits administration, could be final one line. What's their workplace mission? And what's the SWOT analysis for their workplace? And certainly in office areas, the idea is this is filled in with the whole team. So this section manager is kind of doing an audit of where they are in their annual Hoshin. What's the ideal state of the workplace? For benefits admin, it might be that they have 0 errors in payroll, but they're also creating a more competitive set of fringe benefits for their members, or whatever it might be about the state of the culture in their own organization. They want to create a happy team, whatever it might be. But what's the ideal state of their workplace, and what are the issues which are going to stop them from achieving that? What are the gaps? And from that, in their section, they're going to work out the proposed Hoshin priorities and then the key daily management priorities. We deliberately put daily management priorities on here as well, even though this is about Hoshin Kanri, because daily management is not less important than Hoshin. If we don't have daily management, we're not making cars. So why have a Hoshin? So we have Hoshin priorities and daily management priorities. And the idea of this document is that then each division will arrange an away day with their teams, with their management team, where the section managers and department managers will be able to feed back on their own issues and their own problems. And this is giving the division head the understanding of the state of their whole organization. So they're going into that, if you like, mission control type discussion with a complete understanding of how their division is working. What are the problems? How can they feed into the company Hoshin? A discussion. So this starts out, and they get a lot of information, a lot of detail with this, and we expect them to go and present this, but not in a complex way. So this example here shows Assembly Division's end of year summary for 3 years back. Now at the time, we had we were making, I think we were probably at tact means, so we were making one car. Tact time means how fast we build cars. We were making one car probably every 90 seconds coming out of our assembly division. Hundreds of people working here. They're striving for quality improvement, productive improvement. You see direct run here. Driving for zero accidents, driving for OPR is another measure of productivity. You can see they're trying to get their best ever level of quality. This is actually very low compared to our current level, but there we go. That's the strength of Hoshin Kanri. However, rather than take every single detailed activity, they're trying to summarize it together so they can have a very quick explanation of where they are to their peers. So Mick, our assembly general manager, will take this and explain it to all the other general managers for paint, plastics, quality, finance, HR, and so on and so on. So a simple summary, and then some explanation of what the gap is of completed actions and what the remaining focus is to close the gap. So the idea is to take this very, very detailed level of detail, but then summarize it in something which is very understandable. But of course, by doing this, the general manager is getting this valuable information about the state of play of their organizations from a result point of view, but more importantly, from an action and from a culture and from a mood point of view. So they're able to take this, and then they enter this kind of this Hoshin, this company Hoshin planning session. And the point about this is to prioritize the activity of the company. This is how Hoshin's used to look in TM UK, an enormous to-do list with many items in here, categorized, perhaps with many KPIs. Honestly, it really didn't work terribly well because it's not something which we can use to develop and to motivate the whole of the organization. It just becomes a to-do list. We have to prioritize. We end up, when we prioritize, something a little bit more like this. So what I explain on the left here is the company Hoshin. So you can see the left-hand side of the document here. This is just reminders of upper level Hoshins. Toyota Motor Corporation. This is Toyota Motor Europe. This is our midterm plan at the time of this Hoshin. This section here is equivalent to what we used to have in this kind of document. So an awful lot simpler. And the key point here is a very nice simplified image explaining to us and explain to every member what our priorities are as the organization. And maybe just as an aside on this kind of visualization, although we're an engineering company, we like data, we like facts, we like numbers. We take a very long time to design this image because it's critically important for following the Hoshin throughout the year. Why is it critically important? Well, for example, on an earlier slide, I mentioned Toyota business practices. That's a problem-solving methodology which members have to follow in order to get actually any development in the company. But we also talk about QC circles you maybe heard about. So many development we use as a company, and we'd always start a development paper with this Hoshin. So the members are able to understand what's my part to play in the total breakthrough activity in TM UK. So the leadership team in the company take a significant amount of time to debate and discuss about what should go into this top level Hoshin. And then I'll come to it later in a moment, but also to debate and discuss about the why, the what, and the how. I put this slide in here because I might come back to this in the Q&A, but people often say, how do you get from this set of tons and tons of stuff to a more simple to Hoshin? And people, I've heard X matrices used to do this, all sorts of stuff. Very simply for us, we don't need to do this so much anymore. But in the early days, we tend to plot ideas on a matrix which talks about size of impact from low to high and number of divisions affected from low to high. And then we can kind of understand what the breakthrough items are in the top right hand corner. Now, this is a kind of tool we use to get people to understand this. We don't use such tools anymore because we've done Hoshin so many years now, it becomes more of a natural process. But that's the kind of process. You can find many, many tools to prioritize. And if you're having trouble prioritizing items and you do end up with a very, very large Hoshin, it's good to have some method to do this. Because one of the key task for the executive sitting in the room making the company Hoshin is to take all their data and to prioritize. So this shows an example of a away day we did a few years back to make the Hoshin, in fact, an early version, the one you saw on the previous page. And as you can see, it's people grouping ideas by post-it notes and having some discussion. Now, a bit of context for this this picture. At the time, we were facing a big change in our business. We'd expected to have investment in a new model in a couple of years' time. And we'd found that because of Toyota's electrification, its change to electrification, the investment was going to be delayed several years. So I'd explained this as the kind of leader of the Hoshin process to all of these ladies and gentlemen in the room. And I have to say, got a very tough reception. And we did make a Hoshin, and it was a good Hoshin. It was a positive Hoshin. But honestly, as you can see, maybe from the expressions in the room, it was not the most positive experience for everyone in there. And so I took this away and discussed with our HR team how to make it a more positive experience to make the Hoshin. And they went away and they had some internal discussions and discussion with my team. And we decided to do it differently the following year. And this is the following year's Hoshin process. So you can see smiling faces, actually, and you can see Play-Doh, you can see Lego, you can see a mood board explaining what kind of organization we want to create as we move over the next few years. And of course, you can see grouping of Hoshin priority items. Now, the interesting thing about this picture, when you compare it to the last time round, is what the people here are describing is actually how do we create a bridge to survive until next investment? That's quite a tough message. That's the same message I was giving last time. But because we tried to make it a developmental process, we tried to make it something that we're working together as a team. Actually, this little kind of a lovely thing they built here is showing a bridge to the future. So we're able to take the same message, but by treating the Hoshin process creatively to have something which people buy into and people are motivated towards, rather than something where they come up with a set of agreed priorities, but it's something which they kind of have a painful memory of. I think a very interesting observation. You might look at this and say, I couldn't possibly do this in my company. So this is Toyota Manufacturing UK. We are famously data driven. You know, we're famously an engineering company, but this kind of approach, this kind of creative approach to Hoshin really worked well. And it means people are wanting to use Hoshin Kanri as an organization, and they feel included in that. By the way, last year we did this with our senior manager team. So probably sort of 40, 50 people, all doing the same kind of activity, and very, very well received. I think it took a great deal of bravery for HR and my team as well to do this, I have to say. And what we end up with is, as I mentioned, a kind of visualization here. And this is an interesting visualization because this, as a plant, is around the time we started to shift from, I mentioned right at the start of this presentation, we started to shift away from purely conceiving of ourselves as a manufacturing business, just waiting for a model to come in and then engineering that model and manufacturing a new Corolla or whatever it might be, to saying, actually, how do we support the future of the plant and the future of Toyota by developing new mobility solutions? And this is where we started to build things like the used vehicle refurbishment facility, the circular economy facility, the fuel cell Hilux. And I think by building into the Hoshin, it gives a license to the management team to be able to allocate resources, and explain to their members why these things are important. So this is a kind of I can come back to this with more detail maybe on the how we structure this later on if there's a question about it. And then, as I mentioned, this is then how it fits into the company Hoshin. We have this image at the top, and then critically, next level down, we have what we call the why, the what, the how. So what this is for each of the various Hoshin line items. So you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 8 Hoshins here. We generate a why, a what, and a how. And the image is that the how becomes then the why at the next level down. Why do we do this? Why do we do this? We do this because it allows a level of understanding of the upper level Hoshin, but allows a level below to innovate. So it looks like this: the why, the what, the how. I usually use a TMC version of this, but I've actually taken a body shop version, more recent version. So you can see here, it's our company Hoshin. We talk about quality, talks about best in class direct run, for example. And one of the key items we want to demonstrate to generate is members demonstrating customer first behaviors and mindset through Jikote Kanketsu. So in our facilities, it's a complicated Hoshin because it's actually 3 different divisions: facilities, environment, facilities, environment, site service, instructor managers, and also body manufacturing, so a press and weld shop fundamentally. But they take that how and it transfers straight into their, so they take that why and it transfers into their why, what, how. They take the how, transfer to their why, and it comes through into their why, what, how. And the next level down, they're talking about actually how do we develop customer first mindset? Well, we utilize tools to solve problems one by one and develop members and partners using QC tools and QC circles focused on quality. That goes into the press and body Hoshin. You can see here it's now starting to look more like a sort of monthly action plan, and you can see the same wording come in here. And they said one of the key things we need to do is develop a quality dojo. A dojo is a place you learn about stuff. And actually, they've taken this this learning from our assembly shop and brought it into the body shop. And then from that, you can see each action has got a separate sort of month by month detail with KPI. And here's one for quality dojo. So what they're wanting to doing, how they're doing it, the detailed method, and so on and so on. And they update the document live on Teams. You can see like this. So I think this key point I would say from this why, the what, the how, moving up here. The key point about this is it requires a great deal of trust to do, because typically executives want to see every detail of what every person is doing on the whole of the organization, because we want to be able to control what's happening on the shop floor. But doing it this kind of way, giving the level below the freedom to innovate, allows development to take place through the Hoshin, but also it allows a greater breadth of activity to take place. Okay, so I'm going to move now on to moving towards the kind of end of the process here, the management forum. So the point about the management forum is to align all Hoshins and share inspiration for the year ahead. And you can see a group of senior managers here. Typically, we'll take them off site. This is actually our visitor centre, but typically we'll take them off site. We'll give them a breakfast. We have an explanation about the company Hoshin. Maybe some inspirational speaker will come in. But then we have what we call a round robin. And the idea is that each individual Hoshin, each divisional Hoshin, of which there'll be maybe 8, we would be presented in turn to groups of senior managers. So maybe the assembly, paint, and corporate planning senior managers group will go around to listen to first finance Hoshin, then assembly Hoshin, then environment Hoshin, and so on. And this gives a couple of opportunities. So the first is it's a fantastic opportunity for horizontal coordination. So this is a great opportunity to take all members of the senior manager team off site and have them build those networks, build those links, thinking about Hoshin, understanding what each other are doing, maybe taking some hints, maybe taking some, maybe making some requests. It allows understanding for this top-down breakdown, but also we make sure that the company Hoshin and the divisional Hoshins are not finalized until this has happened, because it's the last great chance for the senior manager team to go and give some input into the company Hoshin and some input into divisional Hoshins. So it works very, very well. We then wrap up the Hoshin planning process with a Hoshin speech. So you can see this is being delivered to our office members, and every single office member will listen to the Hoshin speech, typically together, delivered by the director team. And this shows the shop Hoshin rollout. In this case, I think it's in our body shop, actually maybe assembly shop. So in this case, our deputy managing director or managing director plus division head will be presenting to every single member, and they'll present the company Hoshin, but also explanation of what their divisional activity can be. And in this case, I always like to remember in this picture, this is just after Brexit. So this is in 2017, start of 2017, this picture. And we were not shy in explaining to members, actually, it's a very, very big crisis for the company. So, but don't worry about the political side of things. The management team will take that away and discuss and find a way through. What we need to do as manufacturing is to be super competitive, to use our brains, not money, is a very famous phrase, to develop Kaizen, to do what we know we need to do and we can do well. Build in safe, high quality, lean processes, and that'll get us through this kind of difficult time. And I'm told by colleagues in TME that they saw a real actual breakthrough and a real feeling of ownership from TM UK after this kind of very open discussion. What we're trying to do when we explain in the Hoshin speech is to give answers to these questions to each member in the company. You know, what is our future vision? Where do we want to get to? What activity can I do to contribute to that future vision? Yeah, if you've got an activity which is new, like this revenue up, why is this activity important to TM UK? Why aren't we focusing on just manufacturing? And finally, what are our core values? So let's go back to this idea of safety, environment, quality, production, cost, underpinned by HS. What are the core values of the company? And it's a great opportunity to reiterate those core values to every single member of the company. Final parts about follow. I've got a couple of slides about this because although Hoshin Kanri is about making a strong Hoshin, follow is very important. And from an annual cycle through to an hourly cycle, Hoshin touches all of these, if you like, management cycles. Of course, there's more Hoshin at the annual level and more daily management at the hourly and daily level, but Hoshin Kanri is in all of these different cycles. So I already talked about annual cycle from in the slides that I presented so far. From a monthly cycle point of view, an example of this will be our function meetings. So we have a meeting of the leadership team of the company every week, and we rotate between different topics. And in the past, we've maintained the same sort of rotation year on year on year on year. We changed that. And so, for example, in the context of direct run ratio, or direct run, this very, very key quality KPI, rather than having a quality meeting followed by a production meeting the following week, we have a manufacturing performance meeting, which is focusing on this single KPI to do multiple things. Another example, project progress review. So I outlined the number of projects that we are doing in TM UK in an earlier slide. So of course, within our current Hoshin, this is critically important, and therefore we have a weekly project progress review at company level. In previous years, no need for that. So I guess the point is to say how to restructure our governance, our meeting governance structure every year to reflect the Hoshin as it evolves. Divisional follow, maybe just to say on this, every division head, so that means, for example, assembly division, HR division, will have a director meeting either weekly or monthly, but at least once, typically, ideally once a month, they'll focus on the Hoshin as a start point for that. So they'll start with their divisional Hoshin and they'll explain to the director, here's some recognition items to go and see, and here's some struggle points I have, which I need your help with. We say monthly because we want to give freedom. It's not the follow by the director of a divisional Hoshin is not meant to be pushing and shouting, saying, haven't you done this yet? It's meant to be something where they're waiting to give some level of support. So typically it'll be monthly. And that enables the director to understand performance and resource allocation. And the same is true at different levels. So each level is trying to review the lower level Hoshin, typically on a monthly basis. From a daily cycle point of view, we have a daily meeting. So you can see here an example daily meeting with many, many attendees. Key point about this is that we are putting important KPIs for our Hoshin achievement into this. So we follow direct run, for example, every day at this meeting. And so we have a strong, and I'd like to think, kind of integrated system to follow the Hoshin rather than just to make it, forget, and come back at the appropriate time next year. So that's kind of taking you through the whole of the Hoshin cycle. I'm going to summarize now, and I'll turn my screen off and I'll ask any questions, but maybe a couple of thoughts to finish on this. And sort of three key takeaways that I'd like to explain about what I think makes TMUK's Hoshin and Toyota's Hoshin approach strong. So the first thing is we always come back to the fact that Hoshin is about development. By making a Hoshin in this kind of way, at every level, it reconfirms our values and our vision in the company. And the role of the company Hoshin, certainly, and divisional Hoshins, is not to set the task, it's to set the direction, to set the way in which is to set what the level below should be achieving, not how to achieve it. And we rely more on culture and shared understanding, not tools. That's not to say tools are bad in the beginning, but our image is to use Hoshin as a way to develop our people in order that we can have a shared understanding and work without having to rely on administrative tools to run the company Hoshin. Second point is about engaging the organization. So Hoshin Kanri is about engaging everybody and prioritizing together. And that's why we start early and we listen. We ask the directors to listen and not dictate, and we encourage debate and discussion. But the point is, finally, by the 1st of January, we've agreed, and then we communicate. And we communicate with a simple, consistent message at every level, but allowing the next level down to innovate at all times. And the final point about follow. So the first thing is regular and consistent follow. So not waiting for 6 months and then following the Hoshin, regularly understanding what we're doing in the Hoshin and raising the hand on, calling for help if we need it. The job of the supervisor or the leader is to understand status and then support to drive action. It's not to shout at people and tell them to work faster or harder. It's to understand the status and support them to achieve. And the final point is actually we incorporate our Hoshin clearly into our development systems. And that means when we're asking a member to do some level of development for their own career progression, they're not doing it away from what the company needs. They are contributing that activity because development activities should be breakthrough. They are incorporating that breakthrough at whatever level towards our company Hoshin success. So that sort of concludes the if you like, chalk and talk. I hope that was a lot of information. Though what a lot of information. I hope it was understandable and sort of structured in a way you get a grasp of what we're doing in TMUK. I'd like to open for any questions or observations or thoughts or challenges. Of course, it's always very encouraging when people say, "I don't believe you do that," or I can't understand. I can't imagine that, because it gives me a good opportunity to understand better about what we've been doing. So over to you.
Thanks, Rob. That was really enlightening. I have loads of questions, but if anybody wants to start or put up in the chat, I'll kick off with one. You mentioned the kind of an annual cycle there.
Yes.
And I wondered how long term are the high level vision and I presume it's not just for 1 year.
Correct.
How far out do you kind of look in terms of what we're trying to achieve?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, it's evolved actually over time. So typically we'd say 5 years is a very straight answer to your question. Why 5 years? Typically, historically, a car's model life is 5 years. So we produce a new car, 5 years later, you're waiting for the next one. Now, where we are right now, I mentioned right at the start of the presentation, we've extended the life of Corolla because we want to get a new platform which has got a great longevity to it. But we'd still say typically 5 years. It's good to create some sort of milestone. So in the case of where we are right now, we're probably saying 7 years because that's where we think we can be certain of our next model coming in. Please don't. That's kind of a sort of an internal point, I should say. But it's about 7 years. We think there's a milestone in 7 years' time. It's going to be a big one, and then we can understand through that. The other thing I'd mention about that is we've debated in the past about having a 5-year plan, and then every year you're working towards that milestone, then you make a new 5-year plan. That kind of works a little bit when you've got something very, very big, like a huge model change or something like that. But it means that if you do that, if you get to year 4, you've only got a year's Hoshin, so it's not so motivation visionary. So we tend now to do rolling 5-year plan. So each year we're knocking off the previous year, understanding how we've done, and add another year to the end.
Yeah. Few questions in the chat. So one here, do you find the level of documentation hard to maintain? And how do you get the process started and buy-in from people?
Yes, that's a great question. And I had a question the other day. Someone was asking me, can I have a copy of assembly engineering's departmental Hoshin? We don't administer all that. So because the culture is strong, all of the documents. So if you come around TMUK and you go into our body shop, say, you will see the company Hoshin, department Hoshins, all displayed on the wall. So it's responsibility of that leader at that particular level to maintain that document. And funnily enough, the sort of photos I showed earlier on showing the why, the what, the how, that wasn't sort of stated. I went into body shop with my authorized camera and just took photos because that's kind of how we do that. So as corporate planning, as the if you like the strategic function, the function which looks at Hoshin Kanri, we're not administering a big process of checking people's documents. Again, going back to that very early comment, it's about developing the culture. I didn't mention earlier on, but and how to maintain is another kind of is what sparked this thought. Back in the early days when we're starting to trying to create Hoshin Kanri, it's kind of like we'd say, okay, it's Hoshin time. Everyone, we do a Hoshin meeting. And the first couple of cycles, it's quite uncomfortable. People are saying, well, I'm quite busy. I don't want to do Hoshin. Which sounds a bit kind of remote from what I'm doing in my daily job. Whereas today, because we've run that cycle in a very consistent way and we've had the confidence to keep on going, if I don't start talking about Hoshin in August, September, I've got everyone knocking on my desk saying, hey, Rob, it's Hoshin time. Let's get cracking. Because of that, we know we've got the ownership. And because everyone understands their job is to review the Hoshin next level down, it's not an administrative process at all. It was a
Suzanne,
great
did
question.
that answer the question? You happy with that?
Is the hosting process digitalized? Do you have a particular tool or you have a system to cascade, update through the levels automatically? It does it. So partly I've asked that in terms of admin overhead. So it's a role of the individual to do this. And by the way, just something just to illustrate illustrate that point. If you come to TMUK, we'll talk a lot about Andon. So do come one day. It'll be lovely. We'll talk about Andon. Andon's like you pull the cord, you got a problem. It's a great way of finding out the key problems on the shop floor. Now we do have an Andon electronic system. Where you can kind of count up. But typically, we ask the group leader, will do a 5-bar gate. I've got this problem, that problem, the other problem. Because if we have an electronic system, it sits in a box. It's like people writing essays through Chat GPT. They never learn. And so for us, it's not a case of saying we have a very, very robust IT system where there's the cascade kind of going to. It's about people going and finding out and talking and understanding between each other. I'd say KPIs, we have we update KPIs regularly. Again, they're displayed. We have systems where they put on walls so people can see. Yes, we have electronic systems where every day when a member comes into the shop, they say, yeah, direct run's our number one Hoshin priority. How have we done yesterday? Well, 95%. No, not so good. 98%. Thank you very much indeed. So we do have electronic systems, but it tends to be about that.
Mary, you wrote down a question. I wrote down the same thing as well. Do you want to ask Rob?
Yeah, so thanks a million, Rob. That's so insightful. And to be honest, I've tried doing a Hoshin Cannery here. We've a small business. But I think where I have failed to date is getting it down to the production floor level. Now we have obviously nothing like your level, but we have a stop and fix it system here too on the floor. And we're actually just redefining that at the minute. But I suppose what I'm really curious about is how can I do this successfully for a small business? And that might be an unfair question to you.
No. It's a great question actually, because within so TPS was started in the manufacturing business. So for us, it's kind of natural to do this sort of thing. But actually in Toyota, there are other what we'd call small business units. And a great example of that actually is we have something called Toyota Connected, which is if you drive a Toyota, the sat navs and the connected system and so forth, are all developed by these individuals. They have a business unit actually in London, and they wanted to do Hoshin Cannery, and they are doing quite good Hoshin Cannery. Now they're kind of it's a very interesting sort of case study, if you like, because they're quite a small business. I mean, it's not a business of tens of people; it's probably like 100 people, something like that. But also they're in software. They're a very different type of business to manufacturing cars. And they asked me to help set up their Hoshin system. So how did that work? I think the first thing to say is we started out by explaining the purpose of why we're doing Hoshin, that it is something about bottom up. It's about how do we triage is a very word I wouldn't use with it, but how do we kind of forest all of the issues which were being faced in order that they can be taken to make a Hoshin which addresses those issues. So that's the first thing. And of course, that's a kind of leap of faith. But I think by doing the process, the very bottom up process, the Hoshin becomes something which is understandable. Yeah. And then you remember on the shop floor, you remember in the IS the workstation or whatever, it's kind of going, oh yeah, I get that. Oh, I see. Oh, okay, yeah, no, I understand how it relates to my work. That's the first thing. Actually, having the bottom up first is really, really critical. I think the second thing is the culture of then following the Hoshin on an annual basis. So we don't talk about management by walking around. I've only heard this phrase recently, actually, but it's kind of what we do. But apparently it's called management by walking around. But having the supervisor go along and say every month, so how's your Hoshin going? And the critical point I mentioned, but just to reiterate, the critical point is to say, how's your Hoshin going? Anybody else you recognise in your team who's done a really good job? Thank you very much indeed. Anything which is causing you problems, because I can take it away. As an executive, I can take it away and say, you need to speak to somebody else. So I'm guessing in a sort of smaller business, that kind of works quite well because it's about listening. And it's about saying, how can I help you do this? I suppose there'd be two things. I was going to mention another thing which is about development, and it depends on how strong your development systems are. But for me, a real breakthrough thing is to sort of almost insist as TM UK, if someone's doing a course or whatever, and they want to do it on job assignments, they're going to report something out. Always start with what's the Hoshin first of all. So I'm going to do my activity to breakthrough. How does it relate to the actual company Hoshin? And you start to get this thinking of, wow, the Hoshin's really important. By the way, the risk with that is everyone goes, oh, I've got something I want to do, put it in Hoshin, and you get this massive list of stuff. And therefore that bottom up and that triaging is very, very important as well. That would be my thinking. That's what is done in Total Connected. And I have to say, when I saw their Hoshin, I was quite impressed by two things. First of all, it seemed pretty much like people understood it very well. But also, actually, I was like, yeah, this actually reflects very much what our priorities are as well. So clearly, they've got the idea of, they've got the idea of how to do this. One thing I didn't mention, I might just add to this, is part of the value of having the managing director. In that, you remember I showed the picture of the mission control, and I said that the job is listening. Of course, the job is listening, but the job is also to set that vision and to explain about the external factors which are going to affect the organisation. So they have a very critical role as well.
Brilliant.
And I think that
Thank
helps.
you. Thank you so much.
So Rob, just for clarity, the vision comes first and then the bottom up relates to that vision.
Yeah, so I for the sake of time, I took a slide out, but yeah, we're generating a vision based on several things. So, and kind of the job of one of the jobs of corporate planning is to facilitate this. So, what we're saying is, what's the external environment look like? In the case of TM UK, Total Manufacturing UK, we might be saying, well, you know what, actually, the world of automotive is changing. There's lots more shared ownership of vehicles. There's lots more, electrification. There's lots more automated driving potentially coming down the line, 5-10 years, whatever it might be. So what does that maybe mean for us? Does that mean maybe less vehicles being made new, but more maintaining older vehicles? So that gives us a clue to what we should be doing. So we're kind of getting that. There's Toyota's kind of corporate vision as well, of course, and there's benchmarking. So we're saying who else is doing what we're doing, but better. So that's kind of taking all these things in here. So we have what we think the environment's like, how we think we need to move towards that in the context of ourselves as a business unit, in the context of our total business strategy. But yeah, then who's doing really well? Because all of these things you can't do in 1 year. We have to take step by step by breakthrough and do it consistently. Yeah.
Richie. Question, Richie Burke.
How's hey Rob, Richard Burke, my name's work at Tirlon. Just a question on ensuring alignment and accountability at all levels within the organisation to make things visible, actively manage and regularly review throughout the year. So I suppose within that question, obviously there has to be a purpose. So that's the vision you spoke about. But obviously the work needs to be done. We need to understand the capability of the Hoshin plan and obviously the leadership. So how do you ensure that we try and marry that up, that we get success?
Yeah, it's a great question. Actually. I could give you an enormous long answer. I'll try and give you a short one because it's a very deep question. And it's a kind of cultural question, I guess, but maybe some sort of practical things on that. So talking about alignment and accountability first, and thank you for writing it down so I can take it piece by piece. Talking about alignment and accountability. So the why, the what, the how I mentioned, that's very good about alignment and that continuous catchball between different areas. So that allows the toing and froing of the catchball process to align things. Accountability is a real part of that. And to give you an example of how this works sort of practically in the culture of TM UK. So when I set or let's just say, when we have annual objectives, which is a good way of holding people accountable, right? Annual objective is the primary way of doing that. I'm not set my annual objective by my boss. I set them myself and I take them to my boss. And similarly, my members will come to me and say, Rob, what should I be doing this year? And I'll say, well, based on our Hoshin, what do you think you should be doing this year? And of course, that gives this real opportunity for a bit of toing and froing, because maybe I take something which is completely off the mark and my boss can give it a bit of coaching and say, no, Rob, you need to be thinking more about X or Y or Z, or maybe I'm under challenging myself. So I think there's a very, very strong, and that happens at all levels down through the organization. So I think there's a very strong culture of saying we sort of expect people to be self-reliant and they make their own goals, but then they're accountable for their own goals. So we set it, but then it goes in, it's not a soft thing where we just sort of forget about it. It goes into a PeopleSoft type system. And then, we come back to it at the, during my annual review, and my annual bonus is based on that. The second thing is about reviewing. So we review the Hoshin a couple of ways. So we have a mid-year review as a company of the total Hoshin picture. Where are we in terms of KPIs? We have an end-year review as well as part of the Hoshin making process. First thing. Second thing, I mentioned the function meetings. So we structure our weekly meetings based on our Hoshin priorities. A good example of that, we never had a digitization meeting until this year, and we put digitization in the Hoshin because we thought actually AI, digital security, it's incredibly important, and we have that on a currently a monthly basis. We might do it bi-monthly, have that discussion, because we think we've embedded it in order to make that kind of level of accountability and Hoshin follow better. Things like quality, for example, we have a quality Hoshin, but it's kind of followed as normal business, so we segregate out, here's new kind of Hoshin items, and we'll follow those on a monthly basis. And then the third thing I mentioned already is about the leaders going to see the Hoshin in their own areas. So each director is going to go and see their Hoshin in their own area and hold accountable the division head, but in a supportive way. So please report out. So that's does that answer the question? Yeah,
it does. It puts a structure around it. And obviously, I suppose for any company starting off to try and develop Hoshin, they need to have that sort of structural piece in place and understanding. And just another question just before I finish. Is there stuff that objectives that might come up on the Hoshin that can get written off throughout the year, that might be start off the year as an objective, but during the year the dynamics change and the Hoshin then needs to change to reflect that?
Yeah, you can certainly change Hoshin through the year. I mean, it's not such a typical thing to do, to be honest with you, because of that level of discussion and debate which goes on throughout the year. I think at the company level, it'll be less likely, because a company tends to be much more directional, but certainly at divisional level, we might be saying we're doing X project as an important thing, but actually, or we're doing X activity, but the result is not there. So sort of halfway through the year, maybe we're saying, well, actually, let's stop doing that. I think it's more typical to happen during the Hoshin planning process, because there tend to be large items, and we could be doing activity and it's not worked yet, but we want to make sure that it's actually clear that it's not working. So one example of that maybe I'll give. We used to do something called eco cards. So when we're one of 4 global eco plants historically, so ecological plants. This came as a part of making hybrid in Europe for the first time. And we had member cards where they do a number of activities. They get, a bronze card, and do more activities, get a silver card, then do more and get a gold card. And it's very nice for engaging the organization. But as you got more towards a gold card, you could see the effects it was having were less and less, and the efforts which were kind of diverting us away from our maybe core activity, were getting more and more. And we had to have a discussion and say, we need to stop this. We need to do something different on environment. And we chose actually our much more material issues are about energy utilization and VOC. So rather than, we scrapped that activity, and it was actually quite a big debate about this, because we'd kind of got attached to the activity. And I've always been taught it's more difficult to stop doing something than start doing something. And so doing it halfway through a year, we've got a Hoshin, we say halfway through a year, maybe we just reduce the amount of resource to that activity, but then make a conscious decision to stop at the end of the year. Is my honest response to that. If you've got a big external event, COVID, for example, we make a change to the priorities, perhaps, or we make a change to our end result. But because Hoshin defines direction and activity, typically that remains pretty much the same.
Excellent. Thanks, Rob.
Thank you.
Rob, I loved your two photographs of the team meetings, the one where they're all very sullen and the one where they're all excited again. And you're making the point about this being a developmental, innovative process. I hadn't actually seen the form as well, in terms of just trying to generate creative ideas. Just on that topic, the kind of how might we, the kind of innovative mindset, what kind of, did you bring in any training, or how did you get people to get out of the box and start thinking a little bit more longer term?
Well, there are various different answers to that, and it's a really great question, because it is a very, very tricky process, I have to say. In a manufacturing plant, right, for what, 15, 20 years, our job was just make cars, don't distract yourself, you're doing different than just make cars. And suddenly we're saying, all right, we're going to do different businesses. And that's quite tricky. We're still working through that. But how to get people to start thinking about that? Yes, absolutely. We have taken external sort of strategic consultants on and had some discussions and had sort of how can I say, talks from inspirational people. The management forum is a good example of that, actually. We do have sort of formal coaching. So historically, when a person made a senior manager, they'd have some level of coaching in how to behave differently, how to coach their members, and so on. So that's kind of part of it. To be honest, the simple things seem to work the best. So, for example, just taking people out for a day and saying, you've got to be away from the factory for a day, and you've got to turn your phones off. And in the example you saw with the smiley faces, you maybe noticed they had like Play-Doh and Lego and things like that. And that was deliberate. It was to say, kind of takes you back to your childhood, actually. So you're feeling you're in a completely different place. So I would say, first thing is take people away from their day-to-day environment. For sure, I think it's helpful to have someone to give an interesting out of context and to explain inspirational ideas. Try and make them do something they're unfamiliar with, which makes them feel a bit uncomfortable, but is a bit fun and interesting. But the final thing I would say is, it takes time and it takes courage, because people are going to say, really? I can't afford a day away from the factory. What if it breaks down? Years ago, the first time we did a strategic away day, we had a Japanese managing director who was very, very old school. And actually, my boss now, DMD, was the one who got the call. He was away on an away day, and he on strategic thinking, and he had a breakdown in plastic shop. Now, the senior management or the section manager could easily have dealt with it, but the manager was sitting there at the table, and he phoned up Rich and said, "Rich, where are you?" And Rich said, "Well, I'm on a strategic away day." "Well, strategically deal with this problem. We have to work through this, right? You have to kind of, sometimes the people who are in the way will be the top management, and therefore you have to have this level of confidence and courage. And by the way, courage is one of the Toyota Way principles these days. Yeah, having the courage to challenge, to do new things. You have to have this level of courage and creativity as well. Actually, there we go. Creativity to do new things, which is very, very challenging. But I would say TMUK, engineering company, 20 years just making cars, very, very serious. We've sort of managed it, so anybody can do it. If we can do that, anybody can do that.
Yeah. Gary O'Callaghan, question.
Hi, thanks, Steve, and thanks, Rob. So yeah, the first one, just around, I suppose, suppliers. So how do you, engage with them? And I suppose, yeah, the second one then being just year to year, if you've got multiple sections, bottom up, how do you ensure the quality?
That's both of great questions. I'll take them in turn. So the suppliers one, we have it easy actually, because typically for parts suppliers, Toyota Group likes to buy from largely Toyota Group suppliers, is one thing to say. However, the philosophy of our supply chain, that's a kind of that's a result rather than a sort of a direction. We have a particular approach to suppliers, which is to say that we want to support our suppliers. So we'll ask suppliers to deliver, be very, very flexible, deliver things that are got a good quality, good price, or in Renka, we say. And if they're not managing to do that, our approach isn't to get rid of that supply, it's to go out and coach that suppliers. And so to develop them. And of course, as a part of that, problem solving, Hoshin approach, and so on is very key. Now, I would say not every supplier, especially not Japanese suppliers, would be able to do the same level of Hoshin that we're doing. We're kind of an end product. And we're a large organization with a big development team, but we'll send people out to train them. I mean, our first principle is TPS, right? Lean manufacturing. And then the second principle is then how to kind of have that kind of visionary activity. But we are always trying to keep supplies. It's a Toyota philosophy. I was told a story of a supplier who unfortunately went bankrupt, no fault of our own or their own, and our teams went to the supplier, and they and the members of the supplier were involved in taking all the tooling to the people who were doing their jobs. So that's the kind of thinking way, because we have a strong ownership. And the second question within the sections, bottom up, how do you ensure quarter year to year? Are the right discussions in the right areas identified within the sections? Yeah, it's a good one. So I think the key sort of touch point for that is I show the section kind of a SWOT analysis, if you like, the Hoshin planning sheet. That will then go to division. So the division head is running the offsite. So this is their opportunity so they've got division head, maybe 2 or 3 senior managers typically, and then how many section managers. So the division head with the senior manager is just giving some coaching. The section manager reporting back. The approach in this kind of meeting should always be to ask questions. So which is much tougher, actually, I have to say. I'm just thinking this. I'm just answering questions here. So I get an easy job. If you were here in TM UK asked this question, I'd probably be saying, well, okay, what kind of method do you use now, and how, what do you think the weaknesses are? Kind of like that. So almost eliciting that information. So we're treating these activities as a development and a coaching opportunity. So I think that gives a really strong level of understanding and support to the section managers. I always say sometimes section managers think of themselves as just kind of a frontline, not a leader, but they're a leader in the company. They are absolutely key critical position, because they are the people who are leading the members who really know what the problems are. So yes, it's like that. It's that off-site thing, I think, is the kind of the main quality assurance. I guess the other thing to say is that if I showed you, if you remember right at the start of the presentation, I showed you a triangle. It had Hoshin Kanri at the top, and it had various different kind of courses on there. In order to progress in the organization, be it from new graduate entrant to specialist to principal specialist to section manager, or on up through that, you need to do those courses which are training you how to behave, including Hoshin Kanri, including on development, including TBP, which is about practical problem solving, and that's a kind of key skill we use, so root cause analysis for Hoshin Kanri. You have to do the course. You have to then do an on-the-job assignment based on that course and based on how that fits into the company Hoshin. And then especially TBP is and then you have to present it out. And TBP is especially famous because it's a pass or fail. And so you have your A3 document explaining, I've got the company Hoshin here. I understand my role to play in the context of the company Hoshin. I've done some analysis about the gap. I found a point of occurrence at the and I'm doing some root cause analysis and countermeasure and so on. Root cause countermeasure. So you do your very, very detailed analysis over 6 months or a year or something like that, and then you have to present it out in 50 minutes to senior management, so a couple of levels up from HR, from another kind of area, and from L&D. And if they say you fail, you have to do it again. And so in order to get into the level of being a section manager, you've kind of gone through an awful lot of training and development in these tools already. And therefore we expect people to have these skills. We've not gone into this in this detail, but I guess you'll understand from what I've said. Our approach in Toyota is to recruit at specialist engineer graduate level or shop floor at team member level, and develop people then through the ranks to get to these management levels. So my boss, Rich, I think he started as an apprentice, or team leader, maybe actually. I met up with our previous managing director, who went on to become executive vice president of manufacturing business unit Europe, who's in today actually, a guy called Marvin Cook, and he started out as an apprentice in Pirelli and came in as an engineer in TM UK and ended up as EVP of manufacturing in Europe. So that's how we develop people, and therefore we can sort of, it's a tough process to get to be a section manager. So we can have that level of quality assurance. So long answer to 2 questions. Apologies, and I can see 2 more come in there.
Question from Orla. Orla wants to throw a curveball in. That's okay.
Oh, I don't mean to be a wagon, Steve. I'm sorry.
Hello, it's not a bother.
No, I suppose, and I mean, I'm a lean back at myself, Rob. So I mean, I have been trained in Hoshin, Kanri and things like that, but anywhere where I've worked, it's been dumped on one person, and no one really has. And I suppose I'm just surprised that it's not digitalized. It just reads as very, very manual to me, and that's a problem when you're working in a small company where everyone's managing 2 different departments at once, and the rest of it.
So I think it's a challenging, it's a great challenge. It's a challenging situation to be in. So we're a large company, right? And I have one person who does Hoshin Kanri, but it's a very small part of their job, honestly, because we've got through the time when we had an individual who was going around doing Hoshin reporting. So it's almost to see that end goal of saying, where do you want to be in terms of Hoshin, and where do you want to be? You want to be everybody self-reliant. So actually, I mentioned about we're setting up these catchball meetings and so on. In Toyota, in global Toyota, historically, I think it's changed a bit now, but historically, there's none of that because it happened naturally. People know my job is to do Hoshin, so I'll go and chat to the person in finance. Say, here's my Hoshin. So I would say that and all of these administrative things, they're kind of tools to get people capable by themselves to do X, Y, and Z. So we don't that A3 sheet. We do still do the sheet with the section manager sheet because we still have new section managers every year and because it's a good discipline. But my vision would be in 3 years' time, let's come with here's my Hoshin and here's where I am in with a line on there. So I don't want to seem so administrative. The administration is more about we often have this guy called Jeffrey Leica, who wrote a book called The Toyota Way. He often comes here. In fact, I have a signed copy of his book which says, "Thank you for teaching me all about Hoshin Kanri," which I'm very proud of. And he called me, I don't know if he flattered or insulted, he called me a Hoshin nerd when he last came here, and he introduced me to Hoshin nerd. But anyway, there we go.
That's why I'm here today, Rob. Don't worry.
I think he talked about kata. And kata is like if you're doing karate, you just do the same move many, many, many times, so it becomes natural. So the administrative tools are more about doing that same thing many, many times. But it shouldn't be about the Hoshin. If, in a sense, if there's a department looking after Hoshin Kanri, it's kind of not really Hoshin Kanri. And we did have so it's a really tricky question. The point about digitalization, to be honest with you, all of our Hoshins we have in a digital, they will be digital as well. We like to put the physical signature on because being Toyota, we like a bit of wet ink on an A3. It's a kind of it's just a kind of cultural thing. But they'll all be made, they'll be stuck on a machine on a screen. But we don't for this kind of thing, because it's about personal connection and discussion, we tend to shy away from something where there's a process that there's a kind of a cascade is generated. And years and years ago, I remember we had a visit from a guy called Nampachi Hayashi. So Nampachi Hayashi was a student of Taiichi Ono, who was the originator of TPS. So he's a very scary man to come and visit. We were always very terrified when he came to critique our TPS, and he did definitely critique it. He's a supporter of TMUK, he's a big critic as well. And he was his passion was actually TPS, but in particular parts flow. And we were putting in some sort of process about first in, first out with just physical bits. And his comment was that's great. And he said, one day someone's going to come along and they're going to make a nice electronic version of this, and that'd be fantastic and do exactly the same thing. But he said, but keep this system here, not because it's a backup, because it helps you understand how the thing works. And I think that's the key thing. It's like the 5-bar gate. By actually physically doing something, it makes us stop for a moment. And if we have a black box we put, the Hoshin in, and it's just all kind of cascades down or whatever, then it's sort of distant from the people. We need them to sort of physically feel it and physically get it, I think.
Yeah, I suppose it's just more like, I'm just thinking of downtime waits. It's again, I've been tasked with sort of stuff before, and I can, like the feedback is, I'm not filling in all these dots. I've already got my own project tracker. Yourself. Why is this better? Why is this different? It's literally the same output. Really, it's just different format.
Yeah, that's interesting actually. I mean, I think I would say I would characterize Hoshin process. I think we also have project trackers. And that's one of the reasons earlier on, maybe you saw I talked about at a company level. It's not about it's never month by month at a company level, because you're right. Okay. Actually, division is managing month by month. So why would we do that? Almost we want to have the company level understanding of what the total picture is.
That's your
and then
star,
then the division goes, okay, right, now I understand that, now I understand that, I'm going to do it month by month. But it's honestly, so one thing I would say, just to encourage you maybe, or discourage you, I hope it's going to encourage you, but it might discourage you, the why, the what, the how. That's global Toyota practice. That's what we do throughout the plant. The plant throughout all 68 factories and all different affiliates. That's what we're meant to do.
Yeah.
When we first read this, well, that's good, girl. We should do that. We had a new managing director who was in fact the same managing director who went on to become executive vice president I just mentioned. And he said, I want to review all the divisional Hoshins at the start of the year. Of course, no problem at all, Marvin. No worries. And everyone came in with a previous version. It said, well, here's a detail of all the things I'm doing, and line by line, KPI by KPI. And one brave gentleman came in, a guy called Andy Heafy, who's a very passionate Hoshin advocate, and he came in with the why, the what, the how. And Marvin's like, I don't like this. There's no detail. And we're like, no. This is how it's meant to be done. We had to explain to him and say, no, Marvin, it's different. So you need to go to the shop floor month by month and understand it's not a detailed plan.
That's ticked,
And so we've got to stand up for that. And we went, and he sort of went, oh, well, whatever. But then we started to manage Hoshin this kind of way. And the next year, you'd see, 60% of people have got this same why or what, how. And now everybody's got it. So it just takes this level of pushback and encouragement. It's
kind of standard work in its own way. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. And it's a real challenge. It's really, really. The reason I say this, I can understand from your comment. I think it says we've been told by the parent company to just do this thing.
I'm not a fan of this, by the way, but it's like,
but it's tough. And I'm guessing that you're therefore getting this. There's some. So the culture is do this thing, and probably the managing director is like, well, we should just do like this.
Hang on a second,
What about the bottom up? How do we actually do? And again, maybe not to encourage or to discourage.
They don't have it either, to be fair. So I kind of, obviously the frustration feeling is just that, okay, you're told to do Hoshin, and then it's like, okay, well, what's there right now? And it's like, and also like, the challenge in, because obviously you have this in Toyota, you have multiple sites, you all have all different cushions. How is this all cascading up to the very top without losing key information?
I would say I can't. I don't want to kind of give advice which might be wrong, but in that situation, what I'd personally do would be to say, start out with the original plans. So don't worry about formats or it's got to be look like this or that or anything, any of that. And we have different formats. It's fine. I've long lost the battle on it's got to be precisely this format. We've got to say it's got to be simple. But I'd say have a Hoshin planning session where you get the people in from the various different sites, but do it in person. And then say, bring your annual plan. Doesn't matter what format it is.
Okay.
Bring your annual plan, but present in 5
You're going to
minutes.
workshop
do
it
a few things.
anyway, right?
Yeah, exactly.
doesn't
So,
matter.
yeah,
Okay.
so it's a little bit like that kind of, and I always like to use that metaphor about the mission control. So we're going to do the mission control. Just bring your annual plan, and we need to grasp what the problem is, and then just workshop that out, and then say, okay, we're going to make a company ocean. Do it a couple of times. Book several sessions, but it's then bring existing material.
Yeah,
and
you're
then you're
not going to be
making
perfect anyway. It's fine,
Yeah.
you know.
and that's great, and because it's not about making a document, it's making understanding. It's like hearts and minds rather than a beautiful document. And then the more you do that, the more people go, last year it worked, actually, that was really good, you want to do the same, and it becomes you got to, and I've been there, right? I've completely been there in that situation, so I completely get that. That's what I think would be an idea. And step by step, if you get 20% right this time, that's fantastic. Next time you're 50%, next time you'll be 100%, and you're like, whoa. And then like the parent company's like, wow, this is the best in practice of Hoshin Kanri. And then you become the global head of Hoshin.
Oh, I'm not ready for that. Well, that's brilliant. Thank you so much, Rob.
It's a tough journey, I would say, from that top down to that bottom up. It just reminds me of a comment that a lot of people might know, Ryan Tierney at Seaton Matters, and he says that everybody in the company has the same job title, process engineer. I want them to figure out how the process can be done better or easier. And I think the Hoshin is more taking a longer term view of that. So getting out of the day to day and saying, okay, you are the expert. How do you see this in 5 years' time? Now, trying to facilitate that from when you're looking at a top down, objective driven company to a bottom up, well, here's our ideas. That is some journey to go on, I think. And I think you're right, Rob. It doesn't happen in 1 year, because it's going to take quite a while to get that in place. Ciara, you have a question.
Well, I have a question very related to what you're talking about there. First of all, I suppose it's how you were talking there about the bottom-up approach, but like, I suppose in reality, or my reality, I suppose it's the corporate level that know the true future path of the company as opposed to the employees. So how do you marry that together, listening to the voices of the employees and bringing that together with the strategic direction of the company? And like when you have your final Hoshin, what percentage is employee feedback versus company strategic direction?
That's a very good question. Thank you. I think there's a couple of things, a couple of ways to answer that. The first thing is to say we can't have every single employee feedback in the company. It would be impossible to manage. But we need to understand what the main themes are. So that bottom-up approach is to say, well, actually, let me give a practical example. As TM UK, we need to demonstrate that our quality for Corolla is the best in the world to win new business, right? So we need to get, and we've said, well, okay, what does that mean? This is all a management discussion. What does that mean? That means direct run, because direct run is a fabulous measure of quality in terms of standard work adherence. Okay, fine. That's that. So we kind of got that broad direction, and we know what the target's going to be. The best in the world is 99%. We've got to be 99%. Pretty straightforward. But then the question is, how do we get there? And that's then listening to the voice of the member, actually, to understand what the kind of critical points are. And maybe for a couple of years, say, that was about, actually, there's not an understanding of the importance of direct run. People don't realize they've got to keep built-in quality in the way they should. So it's about education. And we kind of intuit, and we sort of explain to people about this. And maybe in certain areas, then they're saying, well, my problem with direct run is I've got real abnormality from parts. So then in that departmental Hoshin, it's about parts of mounting. Well, another area is about standardized work isn't good, or training, or whatever it might be. So you've got the same objective. We understand what our vision is to get somewhere, and we're breaking it down area by area. Welding shop, about sparks, for example, completely different things, but they have the same kind of goal. And that's that why, the what, the how. It's the first thing to say. I think then, so that's a little bit about how you break it down to, so in other words, it is all about the member voice, because we're understanding what the barriers are to achieve this kind of this core goal. I think the second thing to say is that I've described Hoshin Kanri today, but that's the sort of one half of the picture. The other half of the picture is kind of creating a lean environment. We talk about floor management development system. And by the way, I haven't displayed the slide, which Julie will kill me for, but we do a course which looks at the whole picture, actually less on Hoshin Kanri, but more about FMDS. Floor management development system is how individual problems are raised by team members, and then you've seen this when you came around the plant, right? And then the members are raising tickets, for example. This is a small part of FMDS. Members are raising tickets up to section manager level, so first line sort of offline management level from the shop floor. That's how that links into then that's why we start from section manager when we do the Hoshin planning, right? Because they've got an understanding of, crikey, there's a load of issues about parts fit in my section, therefore QA needs to do something on this, or there's a huge number of issues on whatever. So the Hoshin Kanri approach is about the sort of annual marrying up shop floor condition to what the external conditions are. But we've got this whole other piece here of how we make sure we have a considered and understood, what's the word I'm looking for? I'm searching for here. A considered understanding, shall we say, of shop floor condition. And through that, naturally, members feel their voices are being heard, because the key things that they're tackling need to tackle in the company Hoshin. But then when you get more towards that specific activity in the departmental Hoshin or the section Hoshin, then you go, oh, okay, something's being fixed. I hope that's kind of some way to answer the question.
Yeah, it does. It does. And while I have the floor of the second part, you mentioned 5-bar gate a couple of times.
Oh yeah,
what's that?
So 5-bar gate, you just like go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, like this.
Okay.
You're counting defects, so that's 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Like if you're count, so what happens every time the andon is called, you'll say, oh, there's a problem with. It's the same comment actually. There's a great question to ask actually in response to. So the andon's pulled, okay. A member working online, they find a problem. They go andon, and so the team leader's job. So the way. Sorry to get in detail here. So the way that we structure an organisation in TMUK, so when we structure shop floor organisation in TMUK, you have 1 group leader to 4 team leaders to 20 team members. Is a fundamental basis. The team members are in there fitting the parts in the assembly shop, say. Team leaders have 2 roles, one of which is member cover. So if members on holiday or something like that, they'll go and do the process as well. And the second one is andon response. So what that means is we have this concept you probably know called it andon, where a member can pull a cord or press a button, and it says, I've got a problem. Please someone come and help me. And that can stop the line. We've got a little buffer, but that can stop the line. And that's a way of ensuring we don't pass on poor quality. So member pulls the handle, team leader goes along and goes, what's your problem? And member gets got cross thread and it's bulk, can you help me sort it out? I have to do that. And then team leader goes, take all sorted, goes back and writes 1. I've had 1 cross thread today. It goes on, maybe the member pulls an andon and it's a problem with door ring trim, they can't fit it properly, they've got a parts problem. Now, and over time you can see actually just by tallying up the number of problems they've had, they can say, whoa, crikey, you've got a real problem here with cross threads. Right, is it member training then? Or maybe we've got a real problem with parts fit. Right, I need then to go to get parts fit, or whatever it might be. And so my point about that is to say, rather than having a system which is just sucking in data saying the line's been stopped all this time, that member is physically going and making those marks. And that means in the member's head, they're remembering it. This team leader, I should say, that the team leader is remembering it. And so they very viscerally understand, right, okay, now I understand because their job is to fix problems, but it's not just to fix problems one by one, it's to understand how more broadly then they can say, here's a systematic problem I need to fix. So my point about explaining that was really about when we do Hoshin, rather than having a separate system, it's meant to be something which is lived and breathed by the organisation.
Okay, understood. Thanks.
So I should explain that in more detail at the time. Thank you for the question.
Any more questions? I think there's nothing else in the chat at the moment. Anything else from anybody who wants to pop in? I'm gonna ask Julie to say a few words if Julie's still on the call about potential for visits in Toyota. Is Julie still about?
She must be. If not, I can do that. You there, Julie? Yeah, thank you. Thank you for getting that. Yay. Call it there.
Hi. So hopefully you've enjoyed the Hoshin Kanri explanation by Rob this morning. So we do have lean approach seminars based here at our vehicle manufacturing facility at Burniston. and typically we have one a month. So we have seminars planned for, our next one is planned for the 17th of July, and then typically have one each month leading up till Christmas. And I think you've got those dates, Steve. I think I've shared a flyer with you. So
Yeah,
I'm
I'll put
sure.
some. I put July and September out to the group,
Yeah.
and if anybody wants to know those, get in touch
Yeah.
again.
We are hoping to develop some Hoshin Kanri workshops later on in the year, so that will be an opportunity to come onto site, have some deep explanation about Hoshin Kanri, and actually see it in practice on the shop floor. So typically that will probably be in our body shop or assembly shop. So watch this space, and as we develop that activity, then I'll share that with Steve. I'm sure he'll be happy to share that with yourselves as well.
If I just make one other point about this thing, Choice to be a very kind of company wants to be very kind of good in the community. We charge for these seminars, but it goes to our charitable trust. And Julie had an enormously tough, I think rewarding, but tough job, which is identifying small charities around the plants in both Burnaston and Deeside. And we typically favour small charities. This is another point, actually. If you know any small charities in Burnaston and Deeside, if you know any people in those areas, do get in touch. We typically try to go out to charities where they can get a donation of between £3,000 to £5,000. So there's small charities who aren't doing fundraising themselves. And we can maybe share those videos actually, Julie, about what they do. And it's a way in which we try to contribute to local community. To take it back to Hoshin Kanri before I then put the kind of pass back, one of the really important things about our approach to Hoshin is it's a little bit like in the old days you talk about a balanced scorecard. So our vision, our goal as a company is not to make the most cars or to make the most profit or whatever. It's to try and, we talk about best in town, how to be the biggest contributor we can in the areas we operate, whether it's a factory or a dealership or whatever it might be, head office or something. And this is our kind of way of trying to give to the communities in Burnaston and Derby. So if you are interested, they will have a direct benefit on local charities and good causes in our local areas. So just I should mention that point as well.
Yeah, I know a few on the call have been on the last visit we ran. Myself, Alex, Richie was there. I don't know if Sinead is on the call. It's a commitment in time, it's a commitment in cost, but the experience certainly for me was beyond what I expected. A lot of I'd skeptically read about Andon, for example, in books, thinking, yeah, right, cord is pulled, and to see it in practice and go, do you know what? This is so simple and it absolutely works, and it is so supportive. I mean, it is the kind of inverted pyramid. It's not a top-down approach; it's a bottom-up. I've got a problem, and I will be seen immediately. It's the number one priority of my direct report. And to see those issues then get posted up on a board, to see the board issues get posted into a engineering office, I mean, it just puts something into context when you see that in practice. I was blown away by the simplicity of it. I mean, you're right, Rob. I mean, writing a piece of card as opposed to having a digitally recorded issue makes a difference. It just tunes people in more. I mean, there's so many takeaways. The HR presentation, to me, simplified HR. This is like, wow, this is so easy to understand. The quality tour for me was super. Again, really simple stuff. I don't know if you still do it. We were all
We
locked in a
do.
booth in the
Yeah,
Yeah,
dark
we
we
do.
booth
do.
and heard the
Quantity Learning
call, and I
Centre.
came
Yeah.
out shaking and was like, oh my God. And everybody goes through this. I mean, but again, it's just keep it simple. These are
Yeah.
real customers, and this is what happened. And here's our approach to root cause analysis, without drawing PowerPoints and charts and all that. Just make it really practical. So, Julie, congratulations for the. I'm sure that visit has evolved over the years because it's so well thought out, every little section of it. Um, so if we get enough interest from the group, we're really happy to organise something again.
Yeah.
We'll certainly iterate and make our organisation a lot better than last time because we had a few
Can
kind
I
of hiccups with
I
numbers and
just
so on. But
I'm going to interject in one thing. There's a couple of questions about top down and it being very difficult. One of the purposes of the lean seminar actually is if you can get executives who have sort of heard a bit about Hoshin Kanri, or you do lean, do Hoshin, all this, and they come around and really see how it happens. That can be much more powerful because then they go, okay, now I see what it is. And honestly speaking, having a charitable donation makes it a bit easier to stomach saying, well, we get executives kind of come along because it also kind of contributes to the CSR goals of the company. So one of the main purposes is just to get executives along so they go, I've said the word Hoshin, exactly to your comment, actually. Yeah, I said the word and I've read the word and I've read it. Okay, now I get it. Now I can give the support to the people actually practicing lean, and that's really valuable. So sorry to interject, but I realised that was something I should have answered to one of the earlier questions, but it didn't strike me until you made those very kind comments. So thank you very much.
Yeah, no, it really puts a lot of the principles into practice, and the way you've done it there in a simple way. And we weren't bombarded with PowerPoints. We weren't bombarded with lectures. We were shown around the place. Everybody was incredibly open in terms of questions. As I said, you could have brought, Julie, any of that team onto today's session to talk about any aspect, and we'd have been delighted. We'd love to have other people coming on in the future. But if there's an interest in it, we will definitely organise another trip over. And if there's a specific interest in Hoshin Kanri, we'll do that as well. Because I know you're working on a specific workshop there on Hoshin Kanri.
Yeah.
Guys, thanks a million. It's almost 2 hours and it's flown by. So
I just have just another question quickly before Bob goes. Just in relation to timelines, I know I tried to introduce a Hoshin Kanri plan, and I think for executive, especially leadership executive, the biggest fear is fear of failure.
Yep.
That he introduce a process, and then we're going to introduce Hoshin Kanri, and then we go and we try and do a stab at it, and it fails or it doesn't achieve its objectives, and then it's like, that's not going to work, that's not going to fit into our culture, that's not going to sit well with what we're doing, and they don't revisit that, and it's a lost opportunity. So what I'm trying to say, maybe in a roundabout way, what would be the typical timeline for a new business or a new startup initiative where a company is practicing lean but don't really see the benefit of Hoshin from a leadership executive point of view?
It's a great question, actually. And for us, I showed those very, very complicated looking Hoshin didn't really work from, I think, sort of 2006, 7, 8, that sort of thing. And it probably took us. Anyway, what I would say, first thing I would say is we are not doing perfect Hoshin Kanri in TM UK, and still I am working very hard with my team to do more things to do it better, because there's no such thing as perfect. So it's a continually evolving process. How long did it take to get from a point at which it was us sort of saying, let's do Hoshin, everyone, and everyone grudgingly doing it, to being a pull from the organisation? I'm going to say about 3 years, maybe, because the first year it's all a little bit, we're trying to find our feet. Second year, you start to understand what the results are. It might be 4 years, but I think you could do it in 3. The key point is to kind of keep coming back and not blindly following the process every time, because the tools I've explained, the first year is about understanding it. Yeah, it's just okay, I kind of get this, and I integrate it. And like I say, integrating with existing systems, it doesn't want to be something which is sort of imposed as another process. That's kind of terrible. It's about how to treat the planning process. Year 2, you're starting to get some results in some areas, and then year 3, it becomes a sort of more of an accepted process. I mean, what I might say is, I think we talk about Hoshin Kanri as if it's a kind of real, complicated technical rocket science, bowling charts and X matrices and all this kind of stuff, and it makes my kind of brain melt thinking about it all. Actually, it's just about annual planning. It's just about a bottom-up form of annual planning. It's called Hoshin Kanri because it's built in the Japanese and Toyota mold of doing things, but it's about some really simple principles. So I would say, don't throw out your existing management system completely and go, this is all rubbish. If you're doing lean anyway, it's a natural step. It's just a natural step to sort of say, well, you're doing lean, but lean is about Kaizen. It's about managing a sort of steady state and making it more and more efficient. Hoshin is about doing the level of breakthrough above that, but it's the same sort of principles. So I think if you're doing lean already to whatever level and you're seeing some results of that, Hoshin is just development of that. It's a maybe call it lean annual planning or something rather than Hoshin Kanri, if that's scary.
Yeah, maybe that's a good point, because I think Hoshin people tie it into TPS, and they think if they don't do it to the TPS way, then it's not going to be a success. But if they do it to their own way and build it from there, develop their own strategic planning cascade, whatever way you want to frame it. Yeah.
The presentation was deliberately called, I think, Hoshin County in TM UK, because it's a little different to how it's done in France or America or something like that, because of the UK culture is a little different, and our plant history is a little different. So it's almost like taking in those principles, and some of the tools I mentioned I think are very useful, like the kind of section manager thing, but then deploying it in a way which is right for your business rather than
rather than working for Toyota.
Yeah.
I mean, for me, Rich, and just a bit of feedback. I think it's great discussion, because we don't have too many discussions around purpose. But I was in a place there a couple of weeks ago, and they were asked me to have a look at the lean systems, and I saw 5S, and I saw a bit of standard work, and I saw daily management meetings, but I didn't see the why. I didn't see what are we actually trying to achieve in here. Does everybody in this place know what we're about, and what it might be like?
Yeah.
And that was the bit that was missing for me. And it was just a challenge to senior team to be a bit more explicit in terms of what, this is all great, but it's all very granular and very daily kind of stuff. But what's the bigger picture here? And I think when you get people tuned into the why, another fella said to me years ago, and I thought it was a brilliant little vision. He said, my why is that I want my grandkids to be working here in 50 years time, Oh, love that, just a little bit of, where are we going with all this? So, yeah.
Brilliant.
Guys, thanks a million.
Oh, what's another question? If you
great
want,
session.
Daniel, G
recorded.
clicked. One second. I can take one more, because I think.
Okay.
You've been very quiet, Daniel. Sorry. Go.
Oh yeah, go ahead. No,
sir.
I would just want to say to Rob, thanks very much. Brilliant presentation, and it's nice to see someone who is. I will bet, even if you go to bed, when you wake up in the middle of the night, you will just be Hoshin Kanri like this. The way for us it's beginning. Like we are only sinking everything in now. We're trying to all align within the process and the business as well. But oh my God, you were speaking so confident, and I really enjoyed the presentation. So thanks very much.
I'm glad. Thank you very much. It is very kind of you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
He's definitely passionate, isn't he? We'll have Rob again.
Yes. So, it's nice to be part of the presentation like this, because you can actually feel the energy coming in, and it's very hard to get people energetic around. The way it's like in those movies when you're trying to see somebody around to lift you up, and that really was a good one. So really, thanks very much again. Yeah.
Brilliant. Pleasure. Thanks, Rob. Yeah, it was great. So there's a recording. I think Stephen's been recording this video, and we'll put this up on